San Francisco.
All right, you guys, it's episode 50 of Inner Demons, and without further ado, I'm going to jump straight back into this. So I just finished the live with you guys, and I'm staying true to my word. I told you guys that I would drop an episode of Inner Demons. Here I am. So let me jump straight into this. Now, like I do with every episode, I listened to episode 49, basically the last few minutes to see where I was at. Now, I made the move. I made that transition from Ukiah back to San Jose, not back to. This is the first time I've ever lived in the San Jose area. So I made the transition. I made the move. I'm out there now. I'm in an apartment with Vicky and J-Lo. As I've told you guys, she was instrumental as far as lining me up or getting me hooked up with individuals out there that I needed to get in contact with. Now, Gato Marquez was one of the first individuals that I would get in touch with as far as those guys that were part of the regiment, the stragglers, the guys that when Operation Black Widow hit and leadership got indicted, everybody kind of dispersed. Gato was one of those ones that he was a straggler. However, besides Gato, I would also be picking individuals up along the way, like Larry Santos. Now, Larry wasn't part of the San Jose regiment before, so he was somebody new that I picked up that agreed to work with me. There'd be other individuals, but Larry was one of the first ones. And again, Larry was also instrumental as far as resources. When I left Ukiah and I made that move to San Jose, I didn't have nothing as far as like financially. It wasn't like I was sitting on a nest egg out there. I had a little pot of gold or something to help me. I literally had the resources that we had, our own money. I didn't have a bag. I didn't have clavo to flip. It was just basically the money that me and Vicky had, our personal money that we were living off of. So, I had to get out there and jump straight into it in order to make this work. Now, again, I started running things with Larry, and the car never came to fruition as far as me getting a car and installing it with different compartments like Larry had. I told you guys he had a Honda and it was equipped with compartments so that dope could be brought back across the border from Mexico. They were making runs. It never came to fruition. I never got a car. So that was something that just kind of fell wayside. Now, I also had connections that were still in Mendocino County that were good for Yesca. And this is something that Larry was big on. So, occasionally every week or every few days, we would make a run up to Mendocino County. Some of these guys were Indians, American Indians that I'd known real good. Some of them were white guys, but, they were known for harvesting a lot of weed out there, and it was quality weed. So we'd bring up a couple pounds of crystal and they trade a shitload of weed for crystal, and they were loving it. Larry had a lot of that good. At that time, he had that good crystal. The crystal that was being sold out there in San Jose at that time, it was going for $9,000 a pound. It's nothing like it is nowadays. Nowadays, the market's flooded. Everybody's got it. It's dirt cheap and it's garbage. The stuff that I was getting was like glass. It was literally like glass, and that's why they used to call it glass. I would get it. It would come in a black plastic container with a clear top on it, and it had tape around it. But, you could shake it, and it sounded like a bunch of glass shards shaking around in this little container, and that's what it was. And like I said, the people out there in Mendocino County were loving it because they didn't have nothing like that out there. Mexican Mike was also, at that time, I want to say the dope that I was getting from Eminem, and I know I'm backtracking. This was back in '99. I'm just backing up, but the dope that I was getting from Eminem at that time, I want to say it wasn't even crystal. It was that dirty ass dirt crank, that biker crank. But they were loving that too. And I don't need to lie to you guys. I'm telling you guys straight up because I've never liked that uptown feeling. You know, for a minute back in the days, I dabbled with cocaine when they had ether base in it, but I've never ever have tried methamphetamine. I've never tried crystal, never had the urge to, you know, but I'll never forget the smell. I'll never forget that smell. I had been around hundreds of pounds of it, and it's something that once you smell it, that chemical smell, you'll never forget it. Anyway, so as I told you guys, I worked with Larry, I want to say for a good 2 months. And after around 2 months, he ended up catching a case. He got busted, in his car, the car that had the compartments. I want to say that they took the car. He got busted with a gun and some dope. And then they tore the car apart and they found the compartments and all that good stuff. So Larry was gone for a while. And it was heartbreaking when I lost him because, he literally helped get me on my feet. And it was just barely enough to get me going. So, while he was still out there, I'd managed to get a couple pounds and I started flipping it. I flipped it a couple times and I had a couple individuals. So once I got Larry and I got Gato on board, Gato was the one that helped put me in touch with everybody else that was part of the regiment. At that time, you had the three brothers that were from Goshen. You had Sykes, you had Angel, and you had Billy. And all three of them were part of the regiment. Now, Billy was already fighting the case. He was back in the county jail, Santa Clara County Jail, fighting a life case. So I didn't actually get to work with him. However, there were some other individuals that I picked up along the way. Lonnie Marquez, sniper. I'm not sure what hood he was from. Willow was another youngster that I had known from San Quentin. He was somebody else that I brought in. I want to say he was not part of the regiment before, but he was somebody that once he found out I was out there, he agreed to work with me. There was another individual. I'm not even going to mention his name. He was a youngster. I took him up under my wing. He was somebody that I got real tight with. And, I'm not going to call him by name, but I'm going to talk a lot about him, over the course of like probably the next 10, 15 episodes as I go into all the San Jose stuff and the county jail stuff. So, like I said, Billy was locked up in the county jail, so I didn't get to work with him. However, I would end up running into Pony, as I told you guys. Now, Pony was somebody that also was not a part of the regiment. When the regiment was up and running before, he was somebody that I picked up along the way because I ran into him in Quentin. Now, it was by chance that I want to say it was Larry Santos. Don't quote me on it, but I want to say Larry knew how to get in touch with Pony. And it was just by chance that I want to say I had a car that I needed to fix or something. And Larry called Pony. He was a mechanic that Larry knew, and Pony popped up, and it was a trip because, like I said, Pony was one of the individuals that got caught up while I was in Quentin for that conspiracy to commit murder on Juji Lokes. And, Pony would miss his release date, but then he would eventually get parole. They would dump the 115, the IR, whatever you want to call it. And I would run into him out on the streets. Now, again, I know I said this last episode, but because Pony came on early on before I touched base with a lot of these other guys, I wanted to delegate my chain of command early on in the game. So I made Pony my second in command. And that was just it was strictly based on the fact of what I was working with at that time. Larry had never worked in a regiment before, so I didn't, and not only that, it wasn't just the fact that he never worked in a regiment. It was the fact that Larry only wanted to be involved only to a certain extent. Let me just say it like that. He wanted to work and function within the regiment, but he wanted a little bit of latitude to kind of do his thing on the side, which I kind of allowed him to do that because he was a major resource for me. And again, I had a lot of love and respect for Larry, still do. You know, I want to say he's still active to this day. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. But anyway, so after getting in touch with Pony, even though Pony is somebody that he was somebody that really never done no shoot time, really never done a lot of hold time, was somebody that just did like lower level type of time, like in level 2s, level 1 and 2 prisons, H unit, I don't know, wherever he done his time. For somebody that, you know, done that kind of time, he knew a lot of individuals out there in San Jose. He knew a lot of contacts. He knew a lot of how to get in touch with a lot of people. And, you know, he was probably the most, you know, beneficial as far as getting in touch with everybody else. Because once I got at Pony, he basically knew everybody. So after Pony came on, you know, sitting down with Pony, he was like, B, I know an individual from 9-5. He's a good cat. His name's Turtle. And I'm pretty sure he'd be willing to work with him if I got at him. He was like, let me holler at him. And if you know, you want to bring him on, we'll bring him on board. So boom, I bring Turtle in. He brings Turtle over right away. I like to do solid individual. He ended up being one of my hitters. And, you know, he was somebody that was hungry, somebody that, you know, was a hustler out in the streets, somebody that knew how to make money. And, you know, there was a lot of things that, a lot of different ways he benefited the regiment. So I brought him in. Once he came in, he had a primo, which was Baby G, Eric Zarate. Eric Zarate, he was another homeboy that I want to say he was part of the regiment before. He had worked with the regiment, and, you know, he was familiar with how things operated out there as far as that. So right away, I brought him in. Now, you know, one of the things that I always did whenever I would move to a new area like this, even when I was out there in Salinas or when I was out there in, well, Salinas, not so much because it was already established, but like when I was breaking ground in Ukiah, when I was breaking ground in Santa Clara County or San Jose, what I would do is I would always try to go after Northerners or hermanos that had a lot of influence in some of the bigger street gangs out there in whatever area it was in. If it was out there in Santa Rosa or in San Jose, you know, I would go after the bigger street gangs that had a lot of influence. And I would go after the individuals that had a lot of influence within those hoods, because if I was able to bring somebody in that had a lot of influence, that, you know, a lot of their homies looked up to, their neighborhood would become a conduit of the regiment, where they would be a conduit to their neighborhood. And basically we would have their neighborhood at our disposal. In other words, you know, through them, through their influence, you know, we could use their hood for like situations that we, you know, the problems that we were having with some of the upstaters at that time. Shout out to all the upstaters. You know, we would use these bigger street gangs to combat those types of issues. We're not out there gangbanging. We're not supposed to be out there gangbanging. I told you guys before that even though it took me a long time to be able to break that mindset, you know, when you become an NF member, you're no longer supposed to, you know, continue on with that mindset of being a gangbanger, or, you know, identifying yourself as a gangbanger. You're now involved in organized crime, and your whole purpose from that point on is to generate money for the organization. So, you know, it took me a while before I was able to break completely away from that mindset. Even when I became a C, I was still somewhat gangbanging, you know, even though I didn't want to admit it, but I would still find myself wanting to go out there and, you know, get involved, get in the trenches with a lot of these homies, and go down to some of these neighborhoods and, you know, gangbang, do what I used to do when I was younger, when I was hermano. But, you know, over time, like I said, that stuff it's forbidden. You're not supposed to carry yourself or conduct yourself like a gangbanger. So, those were the individuals that I would pursue out there. And again, it's all about how it benefits the organization, how it benefits the regiment, and how you can utilize these resources. So I had Turtle come in with Baby G. That opened up the door for Sykes and his brother Angel to come in. Then you had another individual named Big Al. I don't remember his last name. And a lot of these guys, I don't remember their hoods. But I had another, the other youngster that I told you guys that took up under my wing. He was from 12th Street. I'm going to leave it at that. Solid individual. He was another one of my hitters. Through him, he ended up being somebody that had a lot of influence out there amongst a lot of the youngsters, a lot of the little young riders. So he was able to, bring in a lot of those guys. Ronnie Reith, Short Day was one of them. He came in. Then you had, let me see who else came in after that. You had Model from San Jose. I told you guys is another individual that I knew from San Quentin. Now, let me explain a little bit more on Model. So I told you guys, Model ended up getting busted. He ended up catching a case. So this is the way I used to do it. Whenever I would get 2 or 3 pounds of product, what I would do is I'd chop it all up and I'd make ounces. I'd break it all up into ounces, end up with 80-something ounces or whatever. However many I had, I would break it all up. I'd divvy it up. And then, I had policies dealing strictly with the dope and how we were going to move the dope. The policies were basically, some of the policies that I can remember off top were like, never take more product than what you can get rid of in a week. In other words, don't take 2 pounds if you can't move 2 pounds. If you can only move a half a pound, then only take a half a pound, because otherwise you're going to be on the hook for that. And the regiment dope needed to be moved quick. So, I allowed my guys to also sling their personal dope. I wasn't one of those C's that were like, nah, it's just all about the regiment and that's it. You guys can't make no money. I didn't believe in that. They got to put food on their table as well. And, they can't just make the bare minimum. I allowed them to get their hustle on as well. So all I asked is that the regiment dope be moved first. So, I divvy it up. I have guys that were able to sell pounds within a week. Other guys were able to sell, a half a pound within a week. It went all the way down in increments. There was quarter-pound guys, ounce guys, 8-ball guys, all the way down to teeners, to where cats were barely selling anything. Like Willow was one of them. That dude could barely move like a couple teeners within a week. And then you had guys like Turtle and Cornell, another individual that would come on later, that were good for moving like up to 5 pounds a week. And cumulatively together, collectively together, all together, when you got that many dudes, 20-something cats, all slinging dope, they're all working together, and they're moving that much weight, it adds up. At the peak of everything, when everything was running, I had I'll get into it later. I know I'm moving ahead of myself, but when I had the limousine business established, I had that up and running. I had the dope. I had a couple connections. I had Julio on my team. I had a couple other ballers that we were working with. We were moving up to 30, 40 pounds a month. And do the math. At that time, pounds were going for $9,000 a pop. So we were making money. I was making so much money at that time. I was literally giving money away, throwing money away. Anyway, so those guys came in, and, at that time, the regiment that I was putting together was the only regiment that was established in that area. Now, there was another regiment that was up and running, but it was more towards South County. And that regiment was being ran by Charlie Campa. Now, I knew that Charlie was over there functioning, or that he was running a regiment, and I knew that there was individuals that were plugged in with him. I knew who they were. And, I'm old school. I've always respected the old school rules, or the old format, to where, regiments don't get involved with each other, or they don't work too closely with each other. Even when it comes to networking, you got to do it like it's got to be done at the bare minimum, because the whole purpose for that is because, you know, if somebody's out there, they're making bad moves, they're sloppy, and, you know, they get law enforcement on their tracks, then you got 2 regiments or 3 regiments that are working together, then that's going to bleed over into everybody. They're going to, you know, the cops that are investigating these guys are going to end up stumbling across these guys that are working in the regiment over here. And these guys are going to end up leading to these guys over here. And it just continues to go on and on and on to different, you know, different regiments or different individuals that are functioning out there. When you have one regiment and it's, you know, it's working by itself out there, it's contained to just that regiment. If they got law enforcement infiltration, it's just contained to that one regiment. They get cracked and they're out of there and they're done. But it doesn't go on to somebody else, and then that investigation goes on to another regiment, and that one goes on to another regiment. That's what kind of happened out there in San Jose around 2007 when Lencho's dumbass started working with the other regiments out there. Charlie Campa had his regiment. You had Wino, Sammy Ramirez, he had his regiment, and then you had Lencho. Lencho, being the big dummy that he is, started networking and started basically kind of, you know, using his influence as a longtime member to force some of these other guys from these other regiments to work with them and then network with them. And because of that, you know, I'm going to get into all that later, more in depth, how his girl was able to infiltrate and basically bring everybody down. But that's why those indictments that they kicked off in 2007 just kept on going and going and going and going. Those cops that took those guys down could have made a lifetime career. They could have made a lifetime career out of it because it just didn't stop. And, you know, aside from everybody being tied in together, these guys didn't learn from our mistakes. These guys could have learned and capitalized off of our mistakes. When I got cracked in 2004, everything that we done wrong, they could have paid attention and, you know, capitalized off it. But they didn't do that. Matter of fact, they did everything the same way we did. All the mistakes we made, they made the same mistakes. And it made no sense because all the paperwork from our case was floating around out there on the streets. Everybody had copies of it. Everybody got to read it. Everybody seeing how we were functioning. Everybody seeing, you know, the types of, you know, the ways that law enforcement was able to basically infiltrate and take us all down. But nobody paid attention to it. And they just kept on making the same mistakes. It's kind of pathetic when you put it in perspective, which I will as I go on. But anyway, so at that time, you know, all these guys are all coming in and, you know, Motto, he ends up getting busted. He catches a drug case, catches a dope in a drug case. He gets pulled over in the car. He gets caught with a gun and some dope. So he hits the county jail. And at that time, I didn't have no contacts in the county jail. But he hits the jail and he started causing a lot of chaos over there. I started hearing about it from homeboys that would end up, you know, leaving the jail, would come out to the streets and they'd be like, hey, your boy Motto is in there creating just chaos, bro. And he's doing it using your name. He's dropping your name in the county jail like crazy. You know, his whole thing is he's coming in there trying to take the whole jail over, trying to be proactive, and he's doing it up under, you know, saying it's under your guise, that, you know, he's doing it for you and that he falls up under Big Boxer from Frisco. And I'm like, nah, man, I got to find a way to get a hold of this dude. Anyway, so eventually he ends up calling me and I get a hold of him and I tell him, hey, bro, you got to stand down. You know, what you're doing in there is not cool. I never gave you the authority to take over no OA position. What you're doing is, you know, you're rocking the boat, bro, and you're creating a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos. At that time, there was only one NF member in the county jail, and I didn't even know about it until after. I knew that there was some good NR members in the jail at that time, and the only reason I knew is because some guys that would come out would tell me who was there. but I knew Joe Abeda was there, and he's somebody that I had a lot of respect for. He's somebody that I had worked with in San Quentin. He's also somebody that I was with in Pelican Bay. So when I heard Joe was there, you know, I told Motto to get my number to Joe and have Joe call me, which he did. So at the time, Joe was fighting a 3-strike case, and they had him housed in Area 51, which you guys will end up hearing about that later. Area 51 is like, it's ADSEG. They call it ADSEG, but they call it Area 51 because it's so far up under the jail. It's so, it's locked behind so many security gates, and like you're buried in a dungeon. That's why they call it Area 51. But that's where Joe was housed at. And at the time, there's 4 cells back there. There's 4 cells, a shower, and a TV. And, if you're somebody with health problems, or you're somebody that, you need a doctor in your house back there, you're done. Like I said, you're behind like 3-4 doors, a couple gates, and, these are sealed doors, solid doors. So just to get a phone change, we used to have to yell crazy at the top of our lungs for hours before they would come back there, and they hardly ever count. But anyway, that's where Joe was housed at that time. He was housed back there with, I found out Chopo from Watsonville was over there in the Santa Clara County Jail. And then there was another individual that I had known also from San Quentin that was back there. There was 4 cells back there, but there was only 3 occupied. The third individual was Silencio from San Jose, not Bobby Lopez, another Silencio. I want to say his name was Mario something. I can't remember his last name. But anyway, so Morrow ended up getting my number to Joe Abeda, and Joe eventually reached out to me. He ended up getting at me, and, I was comfortable enough with Joe, and I had worked with him enough to feel like, Joe was a good pick to be the OA for the county jail. So, after getting Joe on the phone and talking to him, I appointed him as the OA, working up under me. Now, because I was a C, and because Joe is just a hermano, I told Joe like this: look, I don't want to be bothered with the day-to-day affairs, the stuff that you can deal with in the county jail. Go ahead and make your decisions, bro. I'm giving you, the latitude to do that. You've been around, Joe. You've been around carnales. You know how to function. You're familiar with the street activities. You're familiar with how the jail works and the protocols and all that. So go ahead and run your program. However, when it comes to major decision making, spilling blood, any kind of clearing somebody that was in bad standings or anything like that, that's when I want you to get at me, and I'll go ahead and I'll make a decision, and we'll communicate like that. So he would call me once a week or twice a week, and eventually Motto stood down, stopped causing conflict in the jail, and Joe would take over. Now, there was a lot of issues that came up over the course of, I want to say, from the time Joe started communicating with me up until the time I got arrested. I want to say it was a good 6-month span of time. So, there was a lot of issues that came up. Some cats, there was green lights, a couple green lights. I put on some individuals. I know that there was a guy, I'm not going to mention his name, but he was from the mob, and, he got removed once, and Joe and a couple of other individuals were speaking on his behalf, saying, Box, he's a solid individual, been knowing him for years. This is the situation, and, if there's any possibility of him getting cleared, he's willing to pay a hefty fine to get cleared. Now, I've never been that type of C to try to just, play homeboys out of money, clear them and take the money and then tell them, hey, go fuck yourself, you're not cleared, or still just putting that kind of burden on homeboys, asking them to pay $10,000 fine. I've never been that kind of C that had a habit of doing that. Now, there's been a couple occasions where it's been done, and this was one of them. And I'm going to tell you guys why. And it was because The reason why this individual ended up getting in trouble had something to do with Lencho and DB. This guy got on the phone, had a conversation, got yelled at, yelled back, he barked back. Next thing you know, he got DP'd, and then he got deemed. And there was also money involved. So being that there was money involved in that, when he was put on bad standings, he never paid that money back. I was just like, you know what, just tell him if he's willing to pay this fine, and if this is what happened. If there's nothing else, I'm gonna clear him, and it'll be done. Considering that he makes good on the fine. So that's one incident that happened while I was still on the streets and I was running the jail, and that money actually did get paid. I had Pony meet. I want to say it was one of his family members. I don't know who. I had him meet up with one of his family members at the mall in San Jose. Now, one of the other reasons why I never believed in doing that is because I've seen a lot of situations where homeboys were locked up, were either in the county jail or in prison, and you get these C's that have a habit of finding these guys. Like Weecha was a good example of somebody that finds somebody. There's a couple others. Lecho's another one. And oftentimes when these guys are giving these types of fines, it's sad because for a lot of these guys, they believe in the cause. They really believe, being Norteños is all they have. They grew up in the hood, and for a lot of them, this is all they know, and it means something to them. So when they're in this situation, they're locked up in the county jail, and they're given a $10,000 fine. Guess who they turn to? Either their wife, who has their kids, or their mom. I've seen it happen. I've heard it. I've heard the conversations. I've seen the transcripts. I've seen it happen in different cases where individuals end up begging their mothers or their wives to come up with that money, put the burden on them. And meanwhile, they're taking food off their kids' table. They're putting their mom through all kinds of stress and grief. And, I don't believe in doing that. Even though somebody is willing to put their own mother through that, and they don't have that same consideration for them, I do. I do. I wouldn't want my mom to be faced with something like that, actually telling my mom, like some of these other guys have done. Mom, if you don't come through with this money, they're going to kill me. I have to come up with this money, and I got a deadline, and, that's wrong. So that's why one of the reasons why I've always been leery to find cats, especially with these crazy ransom type of fines, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. Oh man, $1,000, 1,500, 2,000, whatever. Anyway, so that was one situation that happened. There were some other things that would happen later. I'll get into all that stuff as time goes on. But so, at one point, another situation came up where, like I said, I knew Charlie Campo was out there functioning in, South County. And, I stayed in touch with Charlie for business purposes, and that was it. But as far as networking, we didn't do that at the time because, again, I wanted to keep everything separate. However, an issue ended up coming up with Dimitri. Now, Dimitri was, if you guys remember back to one of the previous episodes, I told you guys when I was in Salinas, I was given a crew to work under me in San Jose. This was a special assignment that was cleared by Skip, Corny, Pinky, and the brothers that were locked up in Santa Rita at that time. But basically, even though I was working in Monterey County, and that's where I was functioning in that regiment with Smokey, I was given a crew that would work under me in San Jose. And the whole purpose of this was to generate money, and because, Dimitri was one of Skip's relatives, and there was some other things that they wanted me to personally take care of while these guys are working under me. Now, it was only a couple individuals. So Flacco was one of the individuals at that time. He was working under me. He was assigned he was either assigned or I requested to have him work with me because he was tied in with Kojak, Dimitri, and I want to say it was only Kojak, Dimitri, Flacco, and maybe it was Gato Marquez. So, anyways, an issue came up basically with Dimitri and another cat that was working up under Charlie. And I want to say, I might be wrong, but it might even have been Charlie's second in command at that time. A cat named Ray Remo. Shout out to Ray Remo. I don't know if you're watching, Ray. I know you watch these episodes sometimes or you watch the channel. But, and with all due respect, homeboy, this is old news. So, it's something that happened. But basically, I'm not going to say who was right or wrong. Ray Remo might even have been in the right. But all I know is Dimitri came at me and told me that Ray Remo had owed him a shitload of money from a transaction that they basically conducted, and Dimitri felt like he got played out of his money. He never got paid back. So I called Charlie and I told him, look, bro, there's a situation that needs to be rectified. I need you to bring your boy and whoever else you want to bring with you out here to Campbell to my apartment so that we can schedule a sit down with the homie about this money that hasn't been paid. So Charlie ends up making his way over. I remember when they came over there, they all came over to Campbell and they're like, what the fuck are you doing out here, bro? Like, this area right here, this is a Sureño stronghold, you know what I'm saying? And they're like, you're crazy, bro. You know what I'm saying? And again, at that time, I seen Sureños here and there, but I didn't see nothing that made me believe that that was a stronghold. However, that will come later. So on the day of the meeting, Charlie ends up pulling up with Ray Remo. I want to say another individual from Mountain View was there. Chino Clip, he was there. And I want to say Rule Atwell, another homeboy that I know very well and have a lot of respect for, was there. So there was like four of them. At that time, I want to say it was just me, Dimitri, and I might have had one or two other individuals that just sat in on the meeting for the purpose of just so that they could, learn from a situation like this. So, I mean, basically we threw a meeting in my apartment. We put a bunch of chairs up and we all sat down and, I let these two do their talking as far as what happened. And, even though Dimitri was working with me, I wasn't gonna have Ray Remo pay that money back just based on that fact alone. What's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. If Dimitri was wrong, I wasn't gonna have Ray Remo pay that money back. There's just no way. I don't operate like that. So I told Dimitri, hey bro, if you're in the right, I'll make sure you get paid. But if not, you're gonna have to squash that, bro. Period. And whatever happens, it stays here today. So anyway, after listening to everything, it sounded like, they had a falling out, but at the end of the day, Ray Remo did not pay Dimitri back. So, I told Ray Remo and I told Charlie both, old boy's going to have to come out of pocket and he's going to have to pay this back. And, being the gentleman that he was like, you know what? I got you. He walked outside, went out to his car, popped the trunk, got the money, came right back up and breaded him out. Done. Paid, and it was a done deal. Dimitri was happy, and, case closed. Charlie and them split, and I want to say that I would not see him again until, years later when everything was said and done in the county jail. So, that was just another scenario that happened out there. Now, keep in mind, over time, I'm continuing to build. More individuals are still coming into the regiment, accumulating guns from the streets. I got these guys selling dope, and I have them, again, I have policies and protocols in place that deal just with the drugs, that deal with conduct, that deal with the street activities. So they're operating under all these policies and all these different things. But at the same time, I also would tell these guys when they're out there on the streets and they're moving dope, if there's people that come up with guns, they want to trade guns for product, I want all the guns off the streets. Get them all, bring them all in. We need everything. Handguns, choppers, Uzis, Tech Nines. I don't care. Bring it all. So I pretty much had accumulated over the course of time like 40 something guns. Everything from AK-47s, AR-15s, SKS, Uzis, Tech 9s, 357s, 44s, 45s, 38s, 22s, rifles, 30 I mean, we had everything. We had everything. I got the pictures. You guys should be seeing some of the pictures from, the raid after they did my house. And even though I'm getting way ahead of myself, I'm still just going to show you guys the pictures of all the guns that I had accumulated. So, at this time, again, we're just in build mode. We're slinging dope, we're accumulating guns, and we're, purchasing materials that will benefit the regiment. Now, at one point, and again, I don't want to get too far ahead because this is going to end up, I'm going to end up, spinning forward too fast and Inner Demons is going to come to a close. But let me just say this. So at one point in time, one of the youngsters that I had a lot of love and respect for, the one that I took up under my wing, he was like, he was like, I know this homeboy, he's a baller. He's a baller, and dude is the type of dude that will want to work, with the homies. He's not an NF groupie or nothing like that, but he's a sympathizer, and he's somebody that I think will benefit the regiment. And I want to present him to the regiment. So I'm like, yeah, bro, by all means, bring him by. We can always use more resources. At the time, I was working with a guy named Big Bird. He's somebody I mentioned to you guys that at one point in time, he was working with the Blancos, and they were selling a shitload of KJ. And I'm talking about millions of dollars worth. So this guy had a taste of, what it felt like to be on real baller status. And he was doing his thing at that time. This is the one that I was getting the crystal from that, it was like the glass. It was like glass. The shards were like glass. So, that unfortunately, that would only last for so long. He would end up catching the case and would get busted as well. So, again, we're in build mode, and I'm always looking for more resources. So he, the youngster ends up bringing this guy by. I tell him, yeah, bring him by tomorrow or whatever, and we'll chop it up. So he ends up coming by the next day with this guy, and I'm not gonna say the guy's name because before in the past, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, the dude got butthurt about me speaking on him in a way of like, calling him a pretty boy, or he was the type of dude that wasn't cut from the same cloth as us, and that he had a different mindset, or he wasn't really one of us. He was like a funny bunny type of cat, and I was just keeping it real. But he got butthurt about some of the things I said in my book, and he took it to heart. And it was never personal, but if he wants to make it personal, that's okay too. But the thing is he brought him over, the youngster brought him over, and he pulls up in a Lincoln, with some 20-something inch rims at that time. Nobody really had them. So, he's flossing. He's got a Lincoln flipped out with the Avalanche, and he got that flipped out with some 30-inch rims. He's the type of dude that's got, gold in his ears. He's got a bunch of gold around his neck, gold on his and all his fingers. You know what I'm talking about? Those kind of funny style cats that like to flaunt, that want to look like ballers. Anyway, so he's all draped in gold, and he comes over one of those big white starters with the fluffy collar. It's got hair around the collar. Just looked like a one of them fly-by-night cats. That's when I looked at him. I was like, oh, okay, so he's one of these little baller, pretty boy type of cats, man. So it's all good though. If the dude's got resources, I want to tap into him. I don't care what he looks like. So He comes by that night, and his thing is smoking a lot of weed, good weed, and we go out to my carport and we're chopping it up, and he's rolling joint after joint, and he's like, I'm not gonna say he's swinging, but he's like, man, it's a pleasure to meet you. I haven't been around too many carnals and wop. And right, I'm like, it's all good, bro. And it's like, hey, the homie, he speaks highly of you, bro. And with all due respect, if you're open to it, man, I'd like to work with you, bro. Because we need resources, and we're trying to build out here, and we're trying to build for the homies, we're trying to build for the familia, right? So, if you're willing to help and assist, bro, it would be it would be huge, and you'd be recognized for that as well. So he was all for it, right? So in the very beginning, he kept his connection at bay. He kept him at arm's length, away from us or away from me. Whenever we would go to the connections, he'd have me wait in the car. Then he'd go in and he'd personally interact with the connection. And this is somebody that he spoke highly about. He's somebody that was like family to him, and he used to talk about how much money he had. And there was a couple brothers, and these guys were tied into all kind of shit, and they were moving major weight. So he got my nose open, talking about the dude like that. So from that point on, it was my goal to like straight scoop this dude up under, slide up under him, and to try to tap into his resources, his connection. So that's what I did. And it's funny, man, because here I am. I'm a regimental commander. I'm running the regiment. I'm basically a shot caller out there on the streets. And the homies are, they look up to me at this time, but I'm running around with this dude. And I'm involving myself in the type of things that he likes to do. He likes to go to Grand Prix, the little car, where you drive the little cars inside. There's a place out there in Milpitas where you can drive on the track. You go in and you put on the suit with the big ass Martian helmet, and you drive around the track all crazy. Well, hey, you know what? If this is gonna get me in with this dude, I'm gonna throw on that big ass helmet, throw on that tight suit, and we're gonna ride cars all day. He would want to do things like that, or go to the mini golf course, or which was cool. I'm like, I ain't got a problem with it, man. I'm not too cool to do stuff like that anyway. I like to have fun. You know what I'm saying? So after 3-4 weeks of kicking it with this dude, all the other homies, they can see right through what I'm doing. They're like, yeah, B's trying to really slide up under this dude. He's always with them. They're always together. The one thing I'll say that I did like about the dude is, even though he had a different kind of business acumen that I'm used to, he still had business acumen. He had ambitions to open up a rim shop. He had ambitions to, invest in a limousine company, which we did. And he had other visions about other things that, he had ambitions to get into. And, for me, it was a win-win. I'm going to keep this dude around, and, if he comes up, I come up. If I come up, we come up. So that's what it was. Now, we started talking more and more about pursuing a rim shop, and there was a lot of money involved. And he had some contacts that were willing to give us rims at wholesale prices, and all we had to do was rent the shop. And it's something that sounded like it had a lot of potential. But before we got into that, we had another opportunity that came up that had more potential, and that's getting into the limousine business. And that's what we did. There was an individual named Cesar Ramirez, who this guy claims was his uncle. That they claim that they were relatives, but I don't believe that was true. But basically, this guy Cesar started a limousine business, and it was called Sharp Limousine. And it was just with a couple small limousines. He wrote up the contracts and the different levels of service, and he rented a shop, and he paid his own employees, and he had it going for a while, until he started to expand, and he started to build to where he was ready to invest in a fleet and go halves with somebody that already had a fleet. So that's what he did. But now when he busted this move, he basically was going to leave behind this shop, which there was at the time it was just one limousine. It was the shop, and it was a starter package. That's what it was, really. So he presented us with an opportunity. He was like, you know what? He's like, I'm getting ready to, graduate, and I'm getting ready to invest in a fleet with a business partner. And this is small stuff, but this is something that you guys can take and you guys can use it to build for yourselves, like I did. If you do it right, you can come up like I did. So we ended up buying the limousine and taking over the shop and everything else from this guy. And we invested probably like 30-40 grand doing it. The limousine was I want to say it was a 12 passenger stretch, just a white Lincoln. It had the fogger inside, the mood lights. It had an overhead badass system. It was hooked up. It was a nice limousine. I mean, at one time, and you guys are gonna hear stories about. I used to drive that limousine around like it was my regular car. I mean, I would drive it to the grocery store. My lady would be in the back, way in the back by herself, while I'd be driving her to the grocery store. That's how I was rocking out there. Anyway, this is probably a good spot to stop this episode, right when I get to the point to where the limousine business is going to start to, come to fruition and we start expanding. So, I'm going to close it up right here. But like I said, I want you guys to keep in mind that, I've already blown through like 40 years of material, and I don't even know if if I've done it the way I should have. I should have drug it out more. I should have, went more in depth into a lot of different things so that Inner Demons could have, it could have went on for like 100 episodes. However, I don't want to go too fast from this point on because I'm already in San Jose. I'm already working out there. There's a lot of stuff that happened, a lot of stuff that I'm going to talk about, and a lot of stuff that I'm going to get into. And there's a lot of stuff that happened in the county jail that I'll elaborate on. But again, if I go too fast, I'm going to blow through this and Inner Demons is going to be done. So you guys just bear in mind that sometimes I'm going to reflect back on some of these episodes on something that happened or something that I missed and just elaborate on it just a little bit more, just to give you guys more content. So for the haters, miss me with all that. You're repeating yourself. You're going over something you're already talking about. Well, too bad. In the future, I might do that just to create more episodes. Not literally tell you everything that you've already heard, but talk about some of the stuff I've talked about, but to go more in depth, if you guys can understand that. So anyways, this right here, this episode 50 of Inner Demons. I'm going to try to put out a couple episodes of War Stories tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Like I said, I stayed true to my word. I did a live tonight. Boy, it was crazy. I had all kinds of trolls up in there trying to do anything and everything they could to stir the pot. I'm not going to get involved in all that. You guys that continue to try to draw me into that negativity, it's not going to happen. Like I said, this channel, we're a grown-up channel. The only thing that we're focused on is trying to become a better channel, trying to improve our content, trying to better our craft. So if that's what you want to see, don't come to this channel. Spin off and go over and check out one of those other channels. Like I said, that's why my views are so low, because I don't indulge in the drama. People like drama. It sells. So you guys that are looking for me to get involved, it's not going to happen. You come over here and you ask these questions about who I like, who I don't like, what I did, what I didn't do, who ran up on me. Man, ain't nobody ran up on me. Ain't nobody pulled up on me. Anybody that's saying that, they're full of shit. And what you need to do is you need to pay attention and look at everything that's being said out there. And you guys can see right through it if you use just a little bit of common sense. Anyways, like I said, you guys, this episode 50 of Inner Demons. Stay tuned for war stories tomorrow. And again, we're going to go ahead and knock out that raffle this weekend. This your boy B, and I'm out.